Jiddu Krishnamurti. Have you ever been seated, completely still and quiet? Try this. Sit down. Remain very quiet, with your back straight, and observe what your mind does. Refrain from controlling it. Just observe. Don't expect it to stop jumping from one thought to another, from one interest to another. Simply stay aware of these jumps. Do nothing, just observe everything, just as you would observe the flowing waters of a river from its banks. In the flowing river, there are so many things: fish, leaves, branches, even dead animals. But the river is always alive, always moving. Your mind is just like this, restless, fluttering from one thing to another, like a butterfly. Our minds are rarely quiet, rarely silent, free from problems and worries. Try to remain very still, without shifting in your seat, without moving your hands or feet. Simply observe your mind. This can be enjoyable. If you do it willingly, you will notice that the mind begins to quiet itself, without any effort on your part to control it. There is no judge, no censor, no evaluator. And when the mind quiets itself in this way, naturally, spontaneously, you discover what it is to be truly happy. Observation is meditation. Observation is extremely difficult. Observing, for example, a tree is incredibly challenging because we carry ideas and images about the tree, botanical knowledge, memories, and so forth that prevent us from truly seeing it. Simply perceiving, paying attention without any judgment is something truly difficult. Have you ever tried looking at a person, a flower, an idea, or an emotion without any choice or judgment? To perceive without condemning, without judging. To observe purely and simply, without selection. To look without condemnation, without interpretation, without comparison. There is great beauty in this, great clarity in observation. To observe means, in fact, to free ourselves from the interference of thought, to see how the image we have of the tree, the person, or whatever it is, interferes with the act of seeing. Let's observe how, so often, we forget what we are looking at, the tree, the person, and let's examine why thought interferes in this way. Thus, to observe means to observe without the interference of our background, our upbringing, education, and so on. Do you understand? Our entire being, which is looking, constitutes this background, be it religious, cultural, intellectual, or otherwise. Through observation, we discover this background. Observing it objectively, without selection, without any bias, is a profound discipline. This observation makes the mind extraordinarily active and sensitive. This, in its entirety, is meditation. Meditation is to be aware of every thought and every feeling, never labeling them as right or wrong, but simply observing them and moving on. To know oneself is not a process of accumulation. It is to see oneself as one truly is: angry, jealous, lustful, envious. It is simply to observe the fact without analyzing. This observation without analysis reveals the entire content of the fact without requiring any effort to uncover it. The moment you try to analyze and understand, you are distorting the fact. You are acting according to your conditioning, as an analyst, as a believer, as this or that. What is can only be observed when there is no I. The moment the brain operates, there is distortion. Can the mind look at the fact non-dualistically? In other words, instead of relating the fact to something separate from oneself, can I look at it without that separation? Can the mind look only at the fact, not at what thought judges about the fact, its opinions, conclusions, prejudices, likes and dislikes, feelings of frustration and disappointment? Can the mind observe just the fact? Then there is true observation, not the idea of the fact. Now, just observe your mind. I am learning about myself, not according to some psychologist or expert. I am observing myself, and I see something within me. I do not condemn, I do not judge, I do not reject, I simply observe. If I see that I am a proud person, I do not say, "How terrible, I must get rid of pride." I simply observe it. Through observation, I am learning. To observe pride means to learn what lies latent in it, to learn how it arose. To look without the observer means to look without the space between the observer and the observed. This does not mean identifying with what is being observed. Therefore, when you can look at a tree, a cloud, the light on the water without the observer, and also, which is far more difficult and requires greater attention, when you can look at yourself without the image, without any conclusion, because the image, the conclusion, the opinion, the judgment, the good and the bad are centered around the observer, then you will discover that the mind, the brain, becomes extraordinarily quiet. And this tranquility is not something to be cultivated. It can happen. It does happen if you are attentive, if you are able to observe all the time, to observe your gestures, your words, your feelings, the movements of your face, and everything else. When the mind is completely silent, both superficially and at the deeper levels, the unknown, the immeasurable, can be revealed. If I am jealous, I must see this fact fully through total observation, not partial observation. I look at my jealousy. Why am I jealous? Because I see myself as alone. And suddenly, I find myself face to face with my emptiness, my isolation, and this frightens me. Can I immediately understand this loneliness? I can only understand it by observing it, not fleeing from it, by looking at it, observing it critically with awakened intelligence, without justifying it, without trying to fill the void. To look at it, I must be free. And when there is this freedom to look, I am free from jealousy. The awareness, the total observation of jealousy, and the liberation from it do not depend on time, but on giving it complete attention, critical awareness, observing it without choice, as it arises in. Then there is freedom, not in the future, but now, and we are then free from what we call jealousy. The same applies to violence, anger, or any habit such as smoking, drinking, or sexual compulsion. Once this awareness is in action, everything that arises, anger, jealousy, violence, brutality, hypocrisy, enmity, can be observed wholly, instantly. This observation is liberating, and the thing ceases to exist. Conflict dissolves through the perception of every movement of thought and feeling, and through the perception of truth within these experiences. Observe the process of anxiety. If you are alert, you can deeply observe the process of anxiety. You will notice that within this observation, there is a desire to choose, to rationalize, but this desire is still part of the anxiety. You must be fully aware of the subtleties of anxiety, and through experimentation, total understanding arises, the only thing that can radically free thought from anxiety. In this observation, you begin to understand the entire movement of thought and feeling. And from this awareness comes silence. Silence is something difficult and strenuous. It is not a mere game. It is not something you can experience by reading a book, or listening to a conversation, or sitting with others, or retreating to a monastery. The silence requires intense psychological work. You must be deeply aware of your snobbery, aware of your fears, your anxieties, your feelings of guilt. And when you die to all of this, then beyond that, death comes the beauty of silence. Silence arrives when you know how to observe. The silence of the mind comes naturally. Please listen to this. It comes naturally, effortlessly, if you know how to observe, to look. Just stop and observe. You are here and now, in the silence of your being. Stay in silence. Make it your home. Within silence, you will gather the strength to embrace life without limits. This power will reflect in your eyes. Silence is the expansion of your heart. It is you. It is who you are. The matrix is complex, but each of us holds a part of the solution. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and together we'll see beyond appearances.